President Trump's rhetoric has undergone a marked transformation, evolving from a stance of non-involvement to one that demands unconditional surrender. This progression introduces ambiguity regarding U.S. intentions in the region, a factor that could potentially escalate tensions significantly. In response to the intensifying conflict, Iran has launched missiles and asserted its capabilities in cyber warfare, which underscores the ongoing military engagements between Iran and Israel. As this situation continues to develop at a rapid pace, the implications for regional security remain profound. The calls for a transition to democracy within Iran are indicative of internal pressures mounting on the regime, which faces increasing challenges to its authority. This internal unrest may significantly influence the dynamics of international relations, particularly in the context of regional power balances. Israel's strategic objective centers on inflicting severe damage to Iran's nuclear program, although the official stance does not explicitly include regime change as a goal. Despite this, there is a growing belief among some experts that regime change could plausibly emerge as a consequence of the ongoing conflict. Amidst the ongoing hostilities, a significant portion of the Israeli populace supports targeting Iran, viewing it as a necessary measure against a regime perceived as a substantial threat. Nevertheless, the definition of what constitutes victory in this context remains ambiguous for a majority of citizens. Israeli officials have stressed the importance of American involvement in addressing Iran's fortified nuclear facilities. In the absence of U.S. support, the complete neutralization of Iran's nuclear program becomes an increasingly daunting challenge, raising questions about the effectiveness of unilateral efforts. The escalating violence in Gaza, marked by recent civilian casualties, accentuates the severity of the situation and the humanitarian crisis facing civilians. This ongoing brutality has elicited widespread condemnation, highlighting the urgent need for humanitarian considerations. The Israeli military's assertions regarding targeted operations starkly contrast with reports of civilian casualties, prompting a contentious debate over military ethics and accountability in conflict zones. This dichotomy encapsulates the complexities of warfare and the moral dilemmas inherent in such operations. The response from the international community, particularly among Western nations, reflects a growing unease about Israel's military strategy and its ramifications for regional stability and human rights. This tendency to scrutinize actions underscores the importance of international standards in conflict scenarios. The necessity for negotiations emerges as a crucial factor in resolving the Israel-Iran conflict, rather than relying solely on military actions or threats. Engaging in constructive dialogue can pave the way for more favorable outcomes and sustainable peace. The implications of the U.S. withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal in 2018 are profound, as this decision marked a pivotal moment that escalated tensions significantly. Future negotiations, had they been pursued, could have potentially offered more promising pathways toward de-escalation. The responses from G7 nations, with particular scrutiny on European countries, reveal a tendency to support Israel's aggressive tactics. This not only raises concerns regarding adherence to international law but also challenges the credibility of these nations, indicating a significant shift in diplomatic stance. President Trump's rhetoric has undergone a marked transformation, evolving from a stance of non-involvement to one that demands unconditional surrender. This progression introduces ambiguity regarding U.S. intentions in the region, a factor that could potentially escalate tensions significantly. In response to the intensifying conflict, Iran has launched missiles and asserted its capabilities in cyber warfare, which underscores the ongoing military engagements between Iran and Israel. As this situation continues to develop at a rapid pace, the implications for regional security remain profound. The calls for a transition to democracy within Iran are indicative of internal pressures mounting on the regime, which faces increasing challenges to its authority. This internal unrest may significantly influence the dynamics of international relations, particularly in the context of regional power balances. Israel's strategic objective centers on inflicting severe damage to Iran's nuclear program, although the official stance does not explicitly include regime change as a goal. Despite this, there is a growing belief among some experts that regime change could plausibly emerge as a consequence of the ongoing conflict. Amidst the ongoing hostilities, a significant portion of the Israeli populace supports targeting Iran, viewing it as a necessary measure against a regime perceived as a substantial threat. Nevertheless, the definition of what constitutes victory in this context remains ambiguous for a majority of citizens. Israeli officials have stressed the importance of American involvement in addressing Iran's fortified nuclear facilities. In the absence of U.S. support, the complete neutralization of Iran's nuclear program becomes an increasingly daunting challenge, raising questions about the effectiveness of unilateral efforts. The escalating violence in Gaza, marked by recent civilian casualties, accentuates the severity of the situation and the humanitarian crisis facing civilians. This ongoing brutality has elicited widespread condemnation, highlighting the urgent need for humanitarian considerations. The Israeli military's assertions regarding targeted operations starkly contrast with reports of civilian casualties, prompting a contentious debate over military ethics and accountability in conflict zones. This dichotomy encapsulates the complexities of warfare and the moral dilemmas inherent in such operations. The response from the international community, particularly among Western nations, reflects a growing unease about Israel's military strategy and its ramifications for regional stability and human rights. This tendency to scrutinize actions underscores the importance of international standards in conflict scenarios. The necessity for negotiations emerges as a crucial factor in resolving the Israel-Iran conflict, rather than relying solely on military actions or threats. Engaging in constructive dialogue can pave the way for more favorable outcomes and sustainable peace. The implications of the U.S. withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal in 2018 are profound, as this decision marked a pivotal moment that escalated tensions significantly. Future negotiations, had they been pursued, could have potentially offered more promising pathways toward de-escalation. The responses from G7 nations, with particular scrutiny on European countries, reveal a tendency to support Israel's aggressive tactics. This not only raises concerns regarding adherence to international law but also challenges the credibility of these nations, indicating a significant shift in diplomatic stance. President Trump's rhetoric has undergone a marked transformation, evolving from a stance of non-involvement to one that demands unconditional surrender. This progression introduces ambiguity regarding U.S. intentions in the region, a factor that could potentially escalate tensions significantly. In response to the intensifying conflict, Iran has launched missiles and asserted its capabilities in cyber warfare, which underscores the ongoing military engagements between Iran and Israel. As this situation continues to develop at a rapid pace, the implications for regional security remain profound. The calls for a transition to democracy within Iran are indicative of internal pressures mounting on the regime, which faces increasing challenges to its authority. This internal unrest may significantly influence the dynamics of international relations, particularly in the context of regional power balances. Israel's strategic objective centers on inflicting severe damage to Iran's nuclear program, although the official stance does not explicitly include regime change as a goal. Despite this, there is a growing belief among some experts that regime change could plausibly emerge as a consequence of the ongoing conflict. Amidst the ongoing hostilities, a significant portion of the Israeli populace supports targeting Iran, viewing it as a necessary measure against a regime perceived as a substantial threat. Nevertheless, the definition of what constitutes victory in this context remains ambiguous for a majority of citizens. Israeli officials have stressed the importance of American involvement in addressing Iran's fortified nuclear facilities. In the absence of U.S. support, the complete neutralization of Iran's nuclear program becomes an increasingly daunting challenge, raising questions about the effectiveness of unilateral efforts. The escalating violence.
Well, Matt, this is a very, very fast-moving situation here in DC. We know the president has convened a meeting of his National Security Council, his closest advisors, inside the Situation Room in the White House. That is ongoing right now, and that follows a flurry of posts from the president in which we heard and saw a very different tone. Most notably, as you just pointed out there, he started to use the word "we" when discussing the conflict in Iran. Remember, it was only a week ago that the line from the White House was that Israel was acting unilaterally and that the US was not involved in this latest attack. But today, in a post, look at this, President Trump said this: "We now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran. Nobody," he said, "does it better than good old USA." And then in a second one, minutes later, the president said, "We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. We are not going to take him out, at least not for now, but we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers. Our patience is wearing thin." And then in a final post, Matt, he called for unconditional surrender.
And Siobhan, do we have any idea what he means by that?
Absolutely none, Matt. I mean, as usual, it is very unclear. President Trump says something, but it is not really clear exactly what he means. On the one hand, he does appear not to be calling for regime change, but on the other, he's demanding unconditional surrender. Does he mean surrender of the regime, or does he mean their complete surrender to American and Israeli demands? It simply right now is not clear. We do know what Trump's demands are, though. We heard those on the way back from the G7 last night. He doesn't just want a ceasefire. He wants an end, he said, a real end, a complete give up, presumably, of Iran's nuclear ambitions and any enrichment activities whatsoever, or else. And it's that or else, Matt, that we know that President Trump is discussing with his closest aides right now inside the Situation Room. Because if Iran doesn't give it all up, as Trump is demanding, will America enter this war? Will the president sanction the use of large bunker-busting bombs delivered by American B-2 bombers, flown by American pilots, hitting nuclear targets deep inside Iran that Israel right now does not have the capability to do on its own? That is the huge question that Donald Trump is asking himself and his cabinet right now. The president who, Matt, remember, campaigned on being a president of peace, of no more wars, and yet appears to be on the brink of sanctioning American involvement in another war in the Middle East.
Siobhan in Washington, thank you very much indeed. Well, the late night post from the US president telling everyone in Tehran, a city of 11 million, to evacuate led to gridlock on roads out of that city. Now continuous intense explosions have been heard west of Iran's capital. As well as attacking from the sky, Iran says Israel has launched a massive cyber war against its digital infrastructure. And the messages coming from Washington are increasingly ominous for Tehran, where the regime is clinging on despite losing so many of its top figures. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilsum, now reports.
Don't stop, drive, yells the passenger as an ammunition dump near Isfahan explodes after being targeted by an Israeli drone. Today, the Isfahan police released a video set to music, allegedly showing a secret cache of drone parts smuggled into Iran by Israeli spies. Last year, it was revealed that the head of the unit charged with uncovering Mossad agents was in fact a Mossad agent himself. In the last few days, the police have been arresting suspected spies, shutting the stable door long after the horses bolted. On Friday, the supreme leader said Iran would inflict heavy blows on the enemy. But today, President Trump seems to be entering the fray, at least rhetorically, on the Israeli side. Writing on social media, "We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding," adding, "We're not going to take him out, at least not for now." Some influential voices inside Iran are calling for the Islamic Republic to relinquish power.
بله، تن بگذار بدن و هیئت حاکمی فعلی کناره‌گیری بکنه.
The Islamic Republic has neither the capacity nor the will to respond to the people's demands or to resolve internal conflicts and disputes. Therefore, there must be a transition to democracy. They must accept this reality. The whole regime must accept the necessity of a democratic transition. I ask the current ruling establishment to step aside.
Today, a reporter wearing a motorcycle helmet for protection did a walk and talk around the ruins of state TV headquarters, a symbol of how power appears to be draining from the regime. Ministers and civil servants are reported to have fled Tehran, while a defense ministry spokesman in front of a digital backdrop was left to provide rote answers to rote questions.
The Zionist enemy, according to the experience of the past 75 years, and considering various military and non-military reasons and various dimensions, strategically speaking, does not have the possibility of resisting and enduring a long war.
Today, the Iranian news agency put out a picture they say shows a missile being launched towards Israel. But it's not clear when it was filmed, nor who is giving the orders. The Islamic Revolution of 1979 overthrew the Shah of Iran. In the last few minutes, his son has spoken from exile. Although so few Iranians have internet now, it's not clear who will have heard.
The Islamic Republic has reached its end and is about to collapse. Khamenei has hidden underground like a cowardly rat and has lost control over the country. Whatever has begun is irreversible. The future is bright, and we will all together pass this historic moment.
Some of those trying to leave Tehran have made TikTok videos saying goodbye to their homes. But leaving is almost impossible now because petrol is running out and there's gridlock. And staying is also impossible because no one knows what tomorrow will bring.
Ambassador, apologies, we'll try and get back to you later, but we're spending too much time of this programme on hearing issues, which we can't really afford to do. Now, the skies over Israel have been relatively quiet over the past 24 hours, apart from some sirens. Iran has continued to launch missiles in this direction, but less of them. Most were shot down, but a few still got through. And in the last hour, a senior Iranian commander has told Israelis to evacuate Tel Aviv and Haifa. Well, I'm joined now by our foreign affairs correspondent, Sikander Kamani. Sikander, what have you heard?
Well, look, Matt, you're right. There's been a very noticeable drop-off in the last 24 hours or so in the number of ballistic missiles Iran has been firing towards Israel. Israel says it's destroyed around 40% of all Iran's missile launches and that they've got aircraft over Iran destroying more right now. It's also possible, I suppose, that Iran is trying to conserve some of its strength for a longer war.
Yeah.
But Israeli military officials are today briefing that they anticipate achieving their aims within the next week or so. It's not clear still, having said that, how they plan on completely dismantling Iran's nuclear capabilities. They've certainly caused major damage, but that key enrichment facility underground, Fordo, well, look, Israel's defense minister today said that it would be addressed, but the consensus has always been it's only those powerful American bunker buster bombs that can take them out, and that's why Israel really wants President Trump to get directly involved. And amidst all these rapidly unfolding developments, a number of senior commentators now saying that Israel's real aim in Iran, in light of its success as it sees it so far, is regime change. The government, members of the government we've spoken to today, though, they deny that.
Missiles and interceptors in the skies above Israel once again. Iran's strikes, for now, seem much smaller than previous days. But several ballistic missiles penetrated Israeli air defense systems. One struck this bus depot in the center of the country.
There are only a handful of minor injuries here, but you can see from the level of damage that's been done, as well as by the size of the crater that's been left just over here, just how powerful the explosion must have been. And all around us, of course, apartment blocks where civilian families are living, although we do understand there's also a military installation of some kind in the area too.
Jonathan lives nearby. He's brought his young children along to try and reassure them no one was killed in the loud explosions they heard from their safe room.
On other occasions, people have been hurt here in Israel. Do you think the war with Iran is worth it?
Absolutely, because in 2 weeks it could be our last chance. If they have the bomb, there won't be Israel, there won't be Jewish people, there won't be nothing. Listen, the only thing we study in the last war with Gaza is that if someone tells you that he wants to kill you and he has the weapon, believe him.
The damage Israel has suffered is nothing like what it's inflicted, but it's still on a scale not seen in decades. And politicians want to be seen leading the fight. This afternoon, Israel's foreign minister visited this town close to Tel Aviv, where 2 people were killed over the weekend.
What's your goal in this war now? Is it the destruction of Iran's nuclear capabilities? Is it regime change, as many are suggesting now?
We have very clear goals. first of all, to severely damage their nuclear program. Regime change is not an objective of this war. It can be a result, but it's not an objective we put to ourselves in this war.
The Iranian regime has done terrible things, but many would say that Israel is the real international pariah, accused of genocide in the International Court of Justice. Your Prime Minister wanted on war crimes allegations by the International Criminal Court.
This ridiculous court and corrupted court never even discussed the issue of jurisdiction, for example, because they don't have any authority over Israel.
Back at the bus depot, politicians are doing the rounds here too. Despite differences over Gaza, government ministers and opposition leaders are on the same page when it comes to Iran. But amidst the calls for unity, a small minority remain outspoken in their criticism of Israel's government and its wars.
Why are they doing the war with Iran now? I don't trust our government at all. It's all for Bibi's gain, all for their gain. He doesn't want people to talk about his trial. He doesn't want any focus to be on the hostages that he's given up on. He doesn't want the focus to be on the genocide that's happening in Gaza.
For now, though, the vast majority of Israelis firmly support the attacks on Iran, even if no one seems clear what exactly victory is meant to look like.
Sikander Kamani reporting there. Well, joining me now from central Israel is the former Israeli Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett. He's previously been in coalition with Benjamin Netanyahu, but was seen by Israelis as more suitable for the role of Prime Minister in a recent poll. Welcome to the programme, Naftali Bennett. I just want to get your reaction, first of all, to what we're hearing out of Washington and the White House. Would you welcome the Americans getting involved militarily on your side against Iran?
That's their decision. I'm not calling on them, or no one here is calling on America to do anything. That's a national security strategic decision of President Trump. If he thinks that denuclearized Iran brings a safer world, that's his decision to make. We're continuing to act one way or another on the Iranian nuclear program and on its regime.
But the understanding is that you cannot, eliminate its nuclear program if you don't take out the facilities at the Fordow plant that is, buried inside a mountain, and that can only happen with American bombs. Without those American bombs, that facility continues.
That's not correct, because a nuclear program is sort of like an assembly line, and if you take out considerable parts of it, which we have in Natanz, Isfahan, and many other locations, you can slow things down, push it back a lot. I'd also say that as the war progresses, as we gain more and more control of Iran's skies and intelligence, new opportunities will present themselves, and I believe there's a reasonable chance we will figure out a way to take out Fordow as well.
Is the objective, or one of the objectives of the Israeli government, regime change in Tehran, and do you welcome that?
No and yes. It's not an objective, and yes, I would welcome that. Everyone probably in the world would be incredibly happy that this terrible regime, which is radical, violent, disconnected, despised by its own people, old, and very feisty regime would fall. It would make the world a better place. But that's not a goal. We didn't go out on this war for that. We went out to denuclearize Iran and hit their ballistic missile program and stop them from terrorizing the whole Middle East and parts of the world.
U.S. intelligence today put out a report to one of the American networks saying there was no evidence at all to suggest that Iran was on the verge of creating a nuclear bomb. Now, if that is the case, then this is an unavoidable and unnecessary war, isn't it?
Quite the contrary. We're not going to wait for a bomb to fall and then begin pontificating what we should have done. Here are the facts. The facts are that Iran has already accumulated enough highly enriched uranium for 10 nuclear warheads at 60% grade. You don't do that for anything but military uses. You don't need 60% for any medical uses, for any R&D, only for warheads. So that in itself is proof. We also know that they've made considerable strides on the weaponization of this, which is to create the literal warhead. We also know that they've attacked Israel twice over the past year with hundreds of ballistic missiles. And we know that their leader, Khamenei, that coward that's hiding in some shelter right now, just a couple of weeks ago said that his goal is to remove the tumor called the State of Israel. So what more evidence does one need to understand that these guys are way ahead in creating these nuclear weapons? We are way after the last red line. This is not on the nick of time. It's after the latest moment, but it's better now than ever.
Right. Now, one reason why some Western governments and many Western publics are very uneasy about what Israel is doing right now with Iran is that they see the level of brutality and destruction after the Hamas massacre on October the 7th in Gaza. And only today, 59 Palestinians at least killed by the IDF while trying to get hold of food. This is the kind of behavior by the Israeli army that makes people very uneasy about what you're doing right now in Iran.
That is a flat lie. Israeli soldiers do not openly shoot civilians that are looking for food. In all of the cases, and we investigated, we're a democracy.
It is not a flat lie, it is the flat truth. Even the IDF has admitted there were casualties, and they said they're looking into it. This is unacceptable behavior.
No, what's unacceptable is death is bad. No one wants to die. I was a fighter. I hate fighting. No one wants to die. No one wants our soldiers to die. No one wants civilians to die. Listen, if we wanted to kill civilians, if we wanted genocide, we wouldn't have dying soldiers every day in Gaza. We'd have 2 million Palestinians dead. The fact is that we're working in a pinpointed way, but here's the fundamental fact that you're not willing to hear, and it's that the basis of the Hamas strategy is to wrap itself with civilians around it. There is no magic potion to make it go away beside what we're doing. If you have a better suggestion, let me know, and we'll bring the magic
We're going to have to leave it there. I'm very sorry. Okay. Thank you very much, Naftali Bennett, for coming on the program. Let's go back to Jackie in Leeds.
And we're sorry we're not going to be able to return to that interview with the Iranian ambassador because of the technical issues, perhaps another day. Meanwhile, in Canada, the abandoned G7 leaders have been left trying to salvage their summit and show they still have clout on the world stage. Sir Keir Starmer, at least, has a US-UK trade deal to show for it, despite having to scramble to stop it blowing away after President Trump dropped it. But there was a slapdown for Emmanuel Macron, and President Zelensky was left discussing the war in Ukraine with the G6. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is still there, though, and he joins us now. Gary.
Yes, here, but it is a depleted occasion. The air's gone out of this G7, you feel, as you say, now down to a G6 because of Donald Trump's early walkout and because of the very belligerent things he said, as it were, on his way out of the building, on his way back to Washington, effectively kind of knocking over the furniture a bit. And before he left, he managed to eviscerate the statement on the Middle East, which the host, Mark Carney, and the other leaders all wanted. It was meant to call on both Israel and Iran to cease fire. Donald Trump wiped those words out of anything he was going to sign. And it was meant to call for a de-escalation in the Middle East now. He changed those words around and said, actually, let's have a de-escalation after the Iranian situation is sorted out. Of course, other issues knocking around here. Quite a few of the leaders in the building, not very far from me, are effectively in trade conflict with the United States. Maybe not the United Kingdom so much now, but a lot of the others. And that remains the case. And some people made a special journey here, a very long journey, in order to meet Donald Trump and maybe impact that trade conversation. India's Prime Minister Modi. You can see here Ukraine's President Zelensky. He came a very long way to talk, of course, about his country. Australia's Anthony Albanese. A 36-hour round trip. Everybody in that delegation was talking about how this is going to be the moment we get to shake hands. Anyway, no shake hands with Donald Trump. But still, the big thing that is dominating here is that Middle East crisis, and what does Donald Trump actually intend to do on it? Very interesting words from Chancellor Friedrich Merz of Germany earlier. He said if Iran does not back down, complete destruction of Iranian nuclear program is on the agenda, which Israel cannot achieve alone. A very clear indication there that his takeaway from that 2-hour meeting with Donald Trump last night was that Donald Trump was preparing to join in that combat on the side of Israel. The weird thing is, only 4 meters away from Friedrich Merz, when he was giving that interview, was Keir Starmer giving interviews to us British broadcasters. And as you'll hear, he was giving an extremely different interpretation of where Donald Trump is going on Iran and Israel. The truth is, you're in the dark, aren't you, about exactly what President Trump has run back to Washington to do? What has he got in mind? Do you know?
Well, as he made clear, he's gone back to deal with the situation in the Middle East.
That could cover a million things.
Well, yes, but just before he left, as you know, we had a discussion about the Middle East, about Israel, Iran for the best part of 2 hours over dinner, and as a result of that, we then put out a joint statement from the G7.
I saw that, but
very clear about de-escalating across the region, including places like Gaza.
He wouldn't sign up to de-escalation as an immediate requirement. He signed up to I've seen the statement. He said, we hope there's de-escalation after the resolution of the Iranian crisis. He's moved a whole lot of military hardware into the region. He's made some threatening noises the moment he left the room. He looks like he's about to deliver an ultimatum to Iran.
Well, I sat next to the President for the 2-hour discussion we had on the Middle East when we discussed the situation in the round. Absolutely clear that everyone was agreed that the Iranian nuclear program cannot be tolerated, that we must de-escalate.
But he's escalated it the moment he's walked out the door. He started talking about how Tehran needs to be evacuated. Enormous kit he's moved to the region. He's not on the same page, is he?
As I say, Gary sat for 2 hours yesterday, had that discussion. I was sat right next to the President. Actually, we went through the statement line by line, so there's no disputing that is the shared statement of intent by the G7. I think it's very important, actually, that it does go beyond immediate ceasefire, because we need a resolution of the conflict. I think it's very important that it is clear about Gaza as well. In terms of needing a ceasefire there.
You're not on the same page as President Trump on Gaza, I'm sure. But Gaza brings me to another point I want to ask you about. Do you think Israel, in its actions in Iran, is acting within international law?
Well, look, it's a fast-moving situation. I've been absolutely clear that we're against the Iranian nuclear program, been absolutely clear that Israel has the right to self-defense, and I discussed the security and safety of Israel when I spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu just the other day.
But no one knows better.
But I've been clear, my absolute focus has always been and remains that we have to de-escalate the situation.
And President
this
Trump
has to be done by negotiation.
Sticking up 2 fingers to that in everything he's said since he left the room.
I don't accept that. I'm not going to stand here and look at interpretations of other people's words. But
the whole world seems to be on edge about this.
I know from being in the room with him as we discussed it what is absolutely clear from the G7 statement.
But on the legality issue, on Israel's actions and potentially America's, if you're wrong and they follow in and join in, you think that Israel is under actual or imminent threat from Iran?
Well,
otherwise you presumably would say they weren't acting.
This is a
inside international law,
complicated situation. I'm absolutely clear in my mind that we need to de-escalate, and that's what I'm absolutely focused on.
But are they within international law?
As I've been in all the discussions here, in all of my comments
it's reasonable
about
to ask
this,
you that,
and is there in the G7.
It's reasonable to ask you. You were an opponent of the Iraq War, 2003. You wrote about it very powerfully, saying that just because some other country might be an unspecified type of threat in the future doesn't give you the right to attack them.
Well, in the middle of a fast-moving conflict, where my focus is on resolution, I'm afraid my focus is going to remain on de-escalation of the situation. Had a good discussion with Prime Minister Netanyahu, good and constructive with him, about the safety and security of Israel, but I'm not going to do a running commentary on legality when in the middle of a fast-moving conflict.
Let me ask you one final question, if I may. When you were standing next to President Trump yesterday, he was asked and seemed to sign up to the idea that he's the main man in all of this. He's the guy you're all looking at, and he could decide where this entire crisis goes. Can the British people sleep safe in their beds knowing that?
Yes, and I'm very pleased to have a good relationship with him. The history between our countries has always been of the closest of allies on defence, security, on intelligence. I happen to have a good relationship with him. That is, in my view, in our national interest, and that in the end is what I keep absolutely focused on in all of my discussions and all of my actions.
Prime Minister, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Now, Robert Malley was the Obama administration's lead negotiator on the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, as well as President Biden's Iran envoy. He's also the author of a forthcoming book, Tomorrow is Yesterday, Life, Death and the Pursuit of Peace in Israel-Palestine. I spoke to him earlier and began by asking if he thinks the war between Israel and Iran is an unnecessary war.
It certainly was an avoidable war, absolutely. I mean, first of all, it was avoidable had President Trump not withdrawn from the nuclear deal in 2018, and it was avoidable again if we had given if a greater chance had been given to the negotiations that President Trump, through his envoy Steve Witkoff, had engaged with Iranians. We don't know how they would have ended. Maybe they would have succeeded. Maybe they would have failed. But certainly, Israel's intervention was designed to prevent any positive outcome of those talks. It certainly was an avoidable war, absolutely. I mean, first of all, it was avoidable had President Trump not withdrawn from the nuclear deal in 2018, and it was avoidable again if we had given if a greater chance had been given to the negotiations that President Trump, through his envoy Steve Witkoff, had engaged with Iranians. We don't know how they would have ended. Maybe they would have succeeded. Maybe they would have failed. But certainly, Israel's intervention was designed to prevent any positive outcome of those talks.
Now, the Israelis claim once again, and this claim has been made for many years, that the Iranians are literally months, if not weeks, away from developing a nuclear bomb. Now US intelligence is saying that that is not the case. US intelligence sources quoted by CNN. Who's right?
First of all, I do say we've heard this for a long time. There's no doubt that Iran is closer. And it became much closer as a result, again, of the decision to withdraw from the deal, which meant that Iran accelerated its uranium enrichment program. But I think as recently as last month, US intelligence said that Iran had not yet made the decision to develop a bomb. And even if it made that decision, I think the best estimates believe that it would take them at least 6 months, perhaps a year or more.
But let's say they survive this, the government survives this war, and they can be brought back to the negotiating table. What do you think their red line would be at the moment?
If they do come to the negotiating table, it seems to me the one thing they won't do, which is the one thing that President Trump has demanded, is surrender and give in to his diktat. That may mean more hardship for the Islamic Republic. It may mean more offensive attacks by the United States or Israel. But it's hard to believe that a regime that has built its narrative on its self-reliance, on its pride, on its resistance, would give up everything. They may have to give up more than they wanted to even a few weeks ago. I doubt that they'll surrender in the way that President Trump has suggested.
One more, if I may. The German Chancellor, speaking at the G7 today, said that the only option really on the table is for a complete destruction of Iran's nuclear program, and that Israel cannot achieve that alone. Do you see government opinion, at least amongst the G7 nations, shifting very much in Israel's direction?
I don't know about international public opinion, but certainly European governments have taken a position that I find quite astounding, which is basically to say, I think the German Chancellor said that Israel is doing the dirty work that the West couldn't have done itself, which is really, in a way, validating what I think most experts would say is a flagrant violation of international law with unpredictable consequences. But certainly one consequence will be a real erosion of any remaining European credibility, and by European I mean European governments and Germany, France, the UK, etc., already deeply, deeply, deeply damaged by their posture during the Gaza war and the onslaught there, and now by this seeming last-minute conversion to the notion that, well, negotiations were fine, but it's better to see Israel take matters in its own hands. That goes against a long history of European claims that they were following international law, international norms. It may have been a charade for quite some time, but it's become even more transparent today.
Robert Malley, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.